This meeting of the Senate Environment and Energy Committee will come to order. We have a long agenda and we are continuing this evening, I believe. So we're going to start with Senate File 666, Senator Eaton, the Wolf bill. And for this bill, because we have to have time limits to get things done, and I know there are more than enough people, both sides of the issue, who wish to speak on it, we are going to limit testimony from each side to about 20 minutes. Have time for the committee deliberation because we are, today and tomorrow we have a long agenda. Senator Eaton, you want to bring it forward, and after you present the bill, we will then have 20 minutes for each side.
Agenda. So I have the, oh yes,
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have Senate File 666. It's a bill relating to natural resources, reinstating the 5-year moratorium on wolf hunting, amending Minnesota Statutes 2012, Section 97B.645, Subdivision 9. And my whole purpose in pursuing this is that there was a discussion, there was a plan for how to keep the wolf from becoming extinct, nearly extinct again, and the agreement was a 5-year plan upon which there would be a discussion as to whether there'd be hunting or whatever. That plan was circumvented, and we had a hunt after not having a count of the wolves for more than 5 years, or nearly 5 years, let me correct myself. And now they're in the midst of a count, and we do not know how many wolves we have. And to me, it just makes common sense when you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to bring a species back from near extinction, that you would wait and see how you were doing before you started having a recreational hunt. I have Senator Hottinger here with me.
Welcome to the committee, Senator Hottinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's nice to be back, and Senator Eaton helped get me elected many years ago, and it's great to see her up here. Chair Marty and members of the committee, my name is John Hottinger, and I'm testifying today as a board member and as the immediate past chair of the Sierra Club North Star chapter, a grassroots organization working to protect Minnesota's environment with over 30,000 members and supporters across the state. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of Senate File 666. The Sierra Club's worked to protect the wolf for many years, in fact, over 3 decades. As a result, the Great Lakes wolf population has made steps towards recovery. Gray wolves once roamed the United States from coast to coast, but they've been eradicated from all of the lower 48 states except one, Minnesota. We're the only state with an original native population that has continuously existed. Gray wolves are a keystone species that allow many other plants and animals to thrive. The loss of wolves would upset the natural balance to the detriment of future generations. Wolves have brought millions of tourist dollars to rural regions of Minnesota as people come to experience these extraordinary animals. Wildlife areas are a key part of Minnesota's outdoor recreation economy and the people it employs. However, despite significant progress, the wolf still occupies just a small portion of its historic habitat. We have extremely limited data regarding the current size, health, and stability of our state's wolf population. For these reasons, Minnesota's official, passed into law wolf management plan included a requirement that no public hunt be implemented for at least 5 years after delisting. The 5-year waiting period was a compromise, agreed to from a strong partnership of stakeholders with a widely inclusive list from hunting, agriculture, conservation, tribal, and public entities. Last year, however, the legislature passed a provision to allow hunting of wolves in violation of that plan's 5-year moratorium. On your Senate website, each of you has a link to a publication, How a Bill Becomes a Law in Minnesota. It guides Minnesotans in how laws are made. You remember, introduce a bill, have hearings. The website, in fact, tells Minnesotans the bill is discussed in one or more committees. After discussion, committee members recommend action, approval or disapproval to the full Senate. But that didn't happen last year. The removal of the 5-year monitoring period happened without a bill, without public notice, without testimony, without a committee hearing for that all-important committee discussion. The provision was, instead, slipped into a bill that had to pass after the government shutdown. Passage of Senate File 666 to reinstate the 5-year waiting period would honor the original intent of the state's management plan and allow for a scientific population assessment and the development of a responsible, data-driven plan for the future. In addition to being good policy, Senate File 666 corrects one of the more blatant abuses of our legislative process in recent memory. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Senator Huttinger, and welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, Barry Babcock was not able to make it, so he had a conflict. So I have Howard Goldman.
Welcome to the committee, Mr. Goldman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, my name is Howard Goldman, and I'm the Minnesota State Director for the Humane Society of the United States, and we support passage of this bill. And I want to thank Senator Eden for her leadership on this critical issue. The Humane Society of the United States has 170,000 members and supporters in the state of Minnesota. I was a member of the Wolf Roundtable that was pulled together by the DNR in 1998. A very diverse group of stakeholders, farming interests, hunters, trappers, the tribes, environmental groups, and our mandate was to come up with a management plan for the wolf, which we did. It took us almost 1 full year. We had 12 separate meetings, and one of the critical pieces of this was a 5-year moratorium on the public taking of wolves after wolves were delisted from the Endangered Species Act. I also represented the Humane Society of the United States at the delisting hearings that were convened by Fish and Wildlife in Grand Rapids. In fact, I offered testimony last year before this very committee in opposition to the season on wolves. As Senator Hottinger said, wolves came off the endangered species list a short time ago, January of last year. And the state of Minnesota rushed to establish a hunt. The 5-year moratorium that I referred to a moment ago that came about as a result of the consensus of the Wolf Roundtable was lifted. Expedited rulemaking procedures were put in place. There were no public hearings, and yet a season was established. The wolf population in Minnesota has been stable without hunting and trapping since 1998. The last statewide population survey was conducted in 2007. The DNR has stated publicly there's no biological basis for the hunt. It's not to control populations. And we don't eat wolves, of course. There's only one reason for a wolf hunt, and that's sport, trophies, recreational killing. No more, no less. Wolves that kill livestock are being trapped by the USDA and the DNR. We have no objection to that. We haven't raised any questions about that. It's necessary to do to protect farmers. We prefer to see non-lethal methods used, but when those have been exhausted and you have to take a wolf that's depredating, then we certainly understand that. Last year, 299 wolves were killed that were depredating on livestock. And that includes wolves taken by the USDA, by the DNR, predator controllers, and also by landowners and ranchers who are now authorized to take wolves that are preying on livestock since wolves have been delisted. Now, we've heard many claims about depredations by wolves as justification for the season. I just want to share one critical number with you. There are 165,000 cows and calves in wolf territory in Minnesota. There were only 81 confirmed cases of livestock depredation last year, according to the USDA. I spoke with the director of the program in Grand Rapids just last week. 81 out of 165,000. Needless to say, that's a very, very low percentage, and I would hazard to say that ranchers and farmers lose far more to disease and to other predators than they do to losses for wolves. During the hunt last year, 413 wolves were killed. Now that's in addition to the 299 that were taken under depredation measures. Moreover, we estimate that illegal killing of wolves was as high as 250 in the state. The shoot, shovel, and shut-up practice is alive and well in Minnesota. There was one study conducted on Camp Ripley, a 10-year study. 20% of the wolves that were radio-collared were killed illegally. 5 were shot, 1 was poisoned. Now, if you add those three numbers together, the 413, the 299 taken under the depredation programs, and the 250 that we estimate were killed illegally, that's a total of 962. Very hard to be precise in this. I just want to give a benchmark figure. That's over 30% of the population were lost due to human-caused mortality. 30%, according to many biologists, is the tipping point where populations begin to decline significantly. People in Minnesota care deeply about wolves. And we're asking, simply asking in this legislation that the 5-year moratorium be reinstated, that the roundtable recommendation be fully honored. It gives the department and the state time to fully study the population, to better understand the effects of the delisting on the population, to hold hearings across the state, to gauge public opinion. This is not just another game species. It was almost extirpated from the landscape. If we must err on the side of caution, urge the committee to pass the bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Questions? I think we'll go through the time slots for both sides and then take questions.
Okay. Nicole Hendrickson?
I believe there are about
Debbie Pierce.
13 minutes left. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and begin.
My name is Debbie Pierce.
Bruce Olson.
First, I want to thank you for the chance to speak to you today about what wolves mean to me and to our family. First, I want to say how very proud we are to be from Minnesota, as we're the only state that has maintained a continuous wolf presence. Here in Minnesota, we've had many opportunities to share our love of wolves with our girls and our grandchildren. We've visited many state parks with them to chase the chance to see or hear wolves' presence. We like to camp in Tetagooch State Park and often lie awake at night hoping for the chance to hear wolves. I've awakened them in the night to hear wolves howling on more than one occasion. They are thrilled by this. Last year in Itasca State Park, we even found tracks and scat. There is nothing like lying in a tent and eavesdropping on the wolf families as they call out in the dark to remind us that we are all part of one big, beautiful family. My husband and I have been visiting Yellowstone National Park for the last 10 years for the sole purpose of wolf watching. Many people we've met there are envious of the wolves we have here in Minnesota, and I'm very proud of that. Seeing wolves in the wild is a deeply moving experience. To us, wolves are a symbol of true wildness. Over the 10 years, we've learned about the many packs in Yellowstone and their family lines. We know these wolves by name and their unique positions in their wolf families. Packs equal families. That's how it works. The alphas are the moms and dads, like 06 and 755 of the Lamar Canyon pack. The yearlings are the babysitters. Middle Gray was playful and so protective of her new sibling pups. 820, another yearling, was an independent sister and beginning to be quite a hunter alongside her mother, 06. When family members are randomly killed, chaos ensues. Packs that lose their alphas can fall apart. Pups which are born in the springtime and are only 6 to 7 months old during hunting season are too young to fend for themselves if they lose their mother or their babysitter. Their chances of survival are slim. This wolf hunt in Minnesota has been devastating to my entire family. Up until last year, we were not going to hunt wolves for recreation. I implore you to do the right thing and reinstate the 5-year moratorium that was responsibly included in the wolf management plan and unjustly tossed out. Please ensure that my grandchildren will be able to share the same wild experiences with their own children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce.
Cole?
Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and begin.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Nicole Hendrickson. I live in Brooklyn Park. Bonjour, Nicole Nindijnaka Jagina Shimong, Brooklyn Park, Nindijaba. Good afternoon, Senators. I appreciate the time. My statement's going to be as quick as possible. So for far too long, we as Native people have had been denied the opportunity to voice, to have a voice. And what we're saying to you today is that Maingan, the wolf, is very sacred to us. It has a historic role and also a role in our lives today. Having access to these animals that were here pre-European contact is really important to us. We have learned to act as family units through teachings from the wolf. This was learned through observation long, long ago. Wolves have a moral right to exist, and I don't expect for you to have a clear understanding of how sacred they are to us, but I am asking that you do respect it. All Ojibwe nations here in Minnesota have declared their territories as wolf sanctuaries. This is because of their importance to us as a society. I have invited my family here. This is my son Noah. This is my fiance Zach. He would like to take 1 minute of your time.
Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and begin.
Aho, bonjour. And dinaway maganidog. Ni now benesi bidagoshen. Makwa and dudem. Awaba beganakag and dunjiba. Gipi nazakunenem. Wewene. Chigagi gadot tamawag. Aaw maingan. Apchigo. Pitendagoziao maingan. I came here in front of you today to talk about Maingan, our brother, the wolf. He's our spiritual brother. He's one of our most sacred animal beings, a guardian of our sacred ceremonies, the Medewan Lodge. Also, he walked the earth in our creation story with the original man, and they named everything. I want to talk about the importance of the wolf. He's our, like I said, our spiritual brother. Our ceremonies have a lot of respect for the wolf, and we are parallel with the wolf. It's in our teachings that whatever happens to Maingan is going to happen to man, to Anishinaabe. We walk together like this, and this is what I was told by our elders, and I came to relay that message. And so I feel very strongly about this, and we as Native people are against the wolf hunt in Minnesota, and that's what I came here to tell you.
Thank you.
Miigwech.
Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you. And sir, because we don't have your name on the record, if you could sign the list that they're putting there for you. Thank you. And Senator Eaton?
Maureen Hackett, my final witness. Dr. Hackett.
Dr. Hackett, you have about 6 minutes left. Please identify yourself and go ahead.
Good afternoon, Senators. Thank you for hearing this bill today. I appreciate it. I'm Maureen Hackett, and I started the organization Howling for Wolves. I'm also a physician. I specialize in psychiatry, and I still practice. I'm a former military officer also. I became involved in the Minnesota's wolf hunting plans when I learned that we were moving very rapidly towards a wolf hunt within the same year that the wolves were basically removed from the endangered species list. In fact, the appropriations bill and the rulemaking process was planned even before the wolf was removed from the endangered species list. So Howling for Wolves formed to give people information and to give people a structure. What we found was that we had a law in place that was represented to the people for 10 years as the law. I know that there are even letters from the DNR to citizens in May of 2011 telling citizens the law is that we won't have a hunt for 5 years following delisting. That was May of 2011. July 2011, the law was removed by the legislature during the budget shutdown. Locked doors, not a lot of opportunity for public input. So what was a vetted law, what was a well-done law, was removed very quickly just as it was about to take effect. So Howling for Wolves formed to give people a voice. Also, I do want to say that in May of 2010, the DNR petitioned the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to delist the wolf, and in that petition, the wolf management plan was referred and contained the 5-year wait before hunting and trapping of the wolf for public take would be considered. That was in the plan, and that was referred to in the comments of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in their delisting. So our basically formed in order to, Howling for Wolves formed to give people a process. The DNR used an expedited emergency rulemaking process which ignored or bypassed any public comment, but they did do an online survey, and in that online survey, 79% of the respondents opposed a wolf hunt. Now, the response to Howling for Wolves was tremendous. People were shocked, they were confused, and as they got more information, they wanted to know how they could have actions and take legitimate actions, organized and productive actions. Most did not realize the wolf was even delisted, and then they did not realize we were rushing to a hunt. So we had people gather signatures, come to events, contribute monetarily, and groups from around the states came together also. You've heard some of them today, people who represent the Native American culture, the Ojibways, ecologists, animal activists, wolf and wildlife organizations such as Center for Biological Diversity, the Sierra Club, Audubon, Minnesota. All of us, along with HSUS, as you've heard, work together. And since last spring, we've gathered, just Howling for Wolves, over 10,000 unique Minnesota signatures onto a letter to Governor Dayton and to the Commissioner of the DNR to not have a wolf hunt. We also gathered 32,000 or more than 32,000 out-of-state signatures and more than 3,000 international signatures. So people don't want this wolf hunt. They're willing to compromise at a 5-year wait. They realized that was the law, and that was the compromise that was reached. During the actual hunting and trapping season, people expressed to us that having Howling for Wolves was helpful. They felt like they had a way to act and express their opinions. We had a December 1st rally in Virginia, Minnesota that was organized by someone from Virginia who was missing the howling that she heard every night because once the wolf hunt started, she lost her packs. She knows that they are the packs that were in her area. We've had letters from all kinds of people talking about missing the wolves that they usually saw, and one woman in Bemidji introduced herself to me and told me she lost her dog to a trap. So what we want to do is we want to put forth this proposal, get it back in place, and I want to tell you a little bit about a poll we had conducted by Lake Research. The poll was done with 600 calls, random dial, digit dial is what you call that. That's a little more expensive because it can't be done by computer dialing. We only accepted registered voters. We had 25% of those polled were cell phones. And again, it was random digit dial, so it wasn't done with the voter file. It was weighted for statewide proportions, meaning that we had metro area, the collar suburbs, the north and the south. And what we found was that the vast majority of Minnesotans do value the wolf as an asset to protect for future generations. That was 79%. 2/3 of the respondents thought that the wolf hunt was unnecessary if wolves could be killed if they threaten livestock and pets or people anyway. 66% opposed the use of traps, snares, and bait. And 67% opposed the decreased penalties of wolf poaching. And finally, our poll results showed that the majority of people supported the 5-year wait before a wolf hunt would be started after the wolf was delisted. Now, there are many reasons to have a 5-year wait. Those reasons were vetted back in 2000, but I'll just mention a few. We have an economy here that actually depends on tourism, and we could develop more of it. The Ely International Wolf Center reports that they bring in $5 to $6 million a year to that economy in Ely. The wildlife viewing industry is a $531 million a year industry. We know that the wolf is important for other wildlife, but even if it's just for the wolf, even if it was only 10% of that, that's $53 million a year. So we know that there's an economic basis. But another reason that I can speak to that the lawmakers need to understand is you heard the history of the wolf. It was persecuted and hated almost out of existence. There's a small minority still in existence here in Minnesota that would like to kill wolves, whether it's legal or not. There's been these statements that having a wolf hunt decreases or the hatred and increases the acceptance of an animal. I can tell you, as a psychiatrist who deals with a lot of violent behavior, you don't really change aggressive behavior by making that behavior more legal. Instead, you model or non-aggressive behavior. So we know, and if you look in your packet, the International Wolf Center has stated this misguided mistreatment of the wolf is real. It happens. People are caught, you know, there was just a conviction last week of a man who ran over 2 wolves with a snowmobile plow, or not a snowmobile, a snow plow in the National Forest. I believe it was Superior National Forest. We also know that people are incidentally snaring wolves. 6 were snared just in January. So the wolf was never before has an animal been taken off the endangered species list and hunted immediately. And when I asked the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service specialist on endangered species in the Midwest, she said never has happened. And you have to think about, well, why would you have such a rush to hunt wolves? We didn't have this rush when the eagle came off the list. We don't have this rush for any other animal. Why? Well, you have to look at the history of the wolf to get an understanding. And out west, where they've had hunts now since 2009, and they've eliminated 70% of their wolves, the hatred is still rampant. It has not decreased. So a really good reason for a 5-year wait is for us to assess and to monitor and to actually try to mitigate that small group minority of people, but also to look at what's the value of the wolf to our state. How can we as a state come together to support livestock producers and the rest? So I urge you, we need this 5 years. We were promised it. It was represented by law. It was in law and quickly taken out, and that's not democratic, and please support the democratic process.
Thank you, Dr. Hackett. And the time for the proponents went over a couple minutes, a minute or two, and we will give the same to the other side as well. I'll ask, well, we'll take the other side first, and then we'll ask if people have questions. So thank you very much. Beginning with Mr. Spreck. Welcome to the committee.
Hello.
Mr. Chair and committee members, my name is Tim Spreck. I'm president of the Minnesota Outdoor Heritage Alliance. MOHA, many of you are familiar with, is an organization that represents approximately 400,000 sportsmen in the state of Minnesota through our 68 member groups. On important issues like this, we bring considerable influence to bear on behalf of our members. Our membership is united in support of continuing the wolf hunting and trapping season as it is. It is proven to be biologically and economically sustainable. You'll hear more information about that later from some representatives from the DNR. But MOHA is here to support continuation of the season as it is, and I'll get out of here and let some additional people testify. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Spreck. Wayne Johnson, and if you, I'll just go down the list I have on my list. Wayne Johnson, Gary Lystico, and Gerald Tyler would be the next 3.
Okay.
Please go ahead, identify yourselves, and begin.
Okay. Good afternoon, Senators. I'm Wayne Johnson. I'm the treasurer and member of the executive board for the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association. I have just a short statement I'd like to read, and then I also will get out of the way. Under state endangered species laws, the wolves were listed by Minnesota as threatened in 1984. They were removed in '96 because their populations had met Minnesota's recovery criteria. They were never extirpated from Minnesota, and in fact, at their lowest population levels, it was still estimated there were 500 to 700 wolves in the state at that time. Under federal law, Minnesota wolves were delisted from the Endangered Species Act in 2007 for 20 months. It was during that time that the last survey was conducted. The DNR managed them until the federal lawsuit instigated relisting under ESA. In January 2012, they were again delisted and are now under state management. Today, Minnesota has a minimum estimated population of 303,000 wolves in 500 packs, the largest population in any of the lower 48. That 3,000 is taken at the absolute low point of their population cycle, so February and March. 2 months from now, that population level will likely double as the pups are whelped. Minnesota DNR's wolf management plan is scientifically sound. It has been approved by the Minnesota legislature and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The wolf plan was adopted in 2001 and at that time included a 5-year wait after delisting before wolf season could be considered. However, in 2001, it was expected that the wolves would soon be delisted as their numbers were growing and well above goal levels. The 5-year wait was removed from the Minnesota Wolf Plan in 2011 due to the recovery of the wolf population and due to the original delisting in 2007. In other words, time served. Wolf research and management professionals agree that Minnesota's wolf season does not threaten nor have any detrimental effects upon Minnesota's wolf population. Biologically, at least 1/3 of the wolf population can be removed each year without jeopardizing the overall population. Wolves are a renewable resource. Like any resource, they need to be managed. Hunting can and should be a continuing part of the wolf management plan. Hunting also helps pay for that management. Hunters as a group are willing to pay for their opportunity to participate, and those dollars in turn provided $284,000 last year for management of the wolf. Lastly, just like with bobcat, fox, beaver, and other fur bearers, managing wolves ensures their healthy future in Minnesota. Hunters are not anti-wolf. We are pro-wolf management. We would like to see a healthy, stable population. Finally, the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association opposes passage of this bill. We support a managed wolf population in Minnesota with hunting as an intimate part of that management. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Gary Leistico. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Gary Lestico. I'm a volunteer attorney. I represent the Minnesota Trappers Association. I am a trapper myself. I'm here on behalf of the Trappers Association. The Minnesota Trappers Association supports a long-term viable population of wolves in the state. It's very important to trappers that that continues to exist. The Minnesota Trappers Association also supports the limited hunt and trapping season that was allowed last year. Trapping has significant restrictions on the activity. There were additional restrictions placed by the law for the season last year. The Trappers Association also asked for legislation in 2008 that would require that new trappers would be certified before they could purchase a trapping license. That was also part of the wolf bill last year, and all new trappers that were coming in seeking licenses for wolf trapping were required to be certified. It's a volunteer program by our association. We pay for all the costs. There's no charge to those taking it or no monies from the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tyler. And then next up we will have John Gilbertson and then the two farm group folks. Is Mr. Tyler here? Oh, he's coming. I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
You trapped in the corner.
Yes. Go ahead. You.
Thank you. My name is Gerald Tyler. I live in Ely, Minnesota. I have asked St. Louis County Commissioner Mike Forsman to join me. In 2009, I brought an action actually it was in early 2010, to delist wolves. The action was brought against the federal government in the way of the Fish and Wildlife Service, and we brought the suit because the depredation of wolves in Ely, throughout the state actually, had reached alarming levels. We had a number of wolves that were habituating actually parts of Ely, and it had reached the state where something had to be done. I called a meeting. We had the Fish and Wildlife Service, the International Wolf Center. I talked to Dr. Meach, who is the foremost expert on wolves, and we finally brought the suit in early 2010. I'm a biologist. I've also hold a law degree from William Mitchell, and I would like to reiterate very briefly, very quickly, the history of the delisting of wolves, because the delisting of wolves is exactly how we got here today. In 1978, wolves were in Minnesota were placed on the threatened list. They've never been on the endangered list in Minnesota since 1978. Early in 2000, after the wolf management plan was adopted by the state of Minnesota, an action was brought to delist wolves. Not an action, actually. The Fish and Wildlife Service brought this whole issue through the endangered species list, and in 2007, as has been testified today, wolves were delisted. The 2007 delisting began the time period pursuant to the wolf management plan. Wolves were put back on the list when HSUS, the Humane Society of America, brought an action in federal court in Washington, D.C., and wolves were again put on the list due to over the merits of the lawsuit, that they were endangered or threatened, over procedural grounds. In 2008, the wolves were delisted as a result of the 2007. Again, in 2009, the Fish and Wildlife Service again published a final rule, as they have to, in another attempt to finalize the proposed rule issued in March of 2006. Again, the Humane Society of the United States and the Howl for America and some of the other groups that are here today that have testified brought an action. Again, in federal court in Washington, D.C., and again, the wolves were, the rule delisting wolves was reversed, was vacated. Again, on a technicality. Wolves that had recovered, and in both instances, the federal Fish and Wildlife Service people conducted extensive research, and they were thus delisted. The reason that I oppose, and many of us in northern Minnesota oppose the moratorium, the reinstatement of the moratorium, is because the depredations continue. I've asked Mr. Forsman, the St. Louis County Commissioner, and St. Louis County passed a resolution supporting the delisting of wolves, is because we have some problem wolves in Minnesota. Why don't you hold the picture of the photograph of the wolf?
Mr. Tyler, Commissioner Forsman, welcome. Mr. Tyler, are you going to have Commissioner Forsman now speak, or are you just gonna...
No, I want him to hold that up. I want to talk about why we oppose the moratorium. That is a wolf, the photograph of which was taken from an automobile. You can give it to them.
In a page go. Thank you, Andy.
And it was taken from 12 feet from that wolf. It's very common to have wolves in Ely around the schoolyards. There's a photograph Mr. Forsman might show up of a wolf collared standing in front of an apartment building home to all kinds of young people. We know that. We don't support the hunting of wolves for trophy, for sport, for anything else. But if this moratorium is imposed, I would point out to you, as someone else pointed out, there'll be no money to support the trappers that have to go out and take these depredating wolves. And you're going to have more instances of depredation because too many wolves have been habituated. I would leave you with this thought, and I know there's a discussion that will take place. If this moratorium is reinstated, as it said, even though it shouldn't be, the 5 years, 7 years has gone by since wolves were first delisted, then this legislature should take action to find the funds to take care of these depredating wolves. If not, it's only going to lead to more illegal taking of wolves, and no one wants, getting dry, to see that. And with that, I'll thank you. And
Mr. Tyler, thank you. Commissioner Forsman, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's good to be here. I came because Jerry's a friend of mine, and he has been very active in this, and as you know, and has testified here before. But St. Louis County did pass a resolution in support of the management of wolves, and I think that's the key, is that we are asking the state of Minnesota to continue the management of wolves. Certainly no hunting, no trapping, there is no management. And I do have one other exhibit, and this is an exhibit from a friend of mine. I would like to have, if you could pass it among yourselves, you can keep it. But it's a picture of something that happens way too often in northern Minnesota. This picture is a picture of Steve Beyondich, a friend of mine, and his dog. If you notice, his dog is still on his collar, but the dog has been eaten by wolves. Right near his, as you'll see in the pictures, it is even close to his implement shed and close to his home. This is not unusual. We have had any number of people that have lost their animals, and most people that love dogs, love cats, they do appreciate the wolf, but they don't appreciate the wolf eating their dogs or their cats. The other thing is, I live 2 blocks from the edge of town, which is in Ely, Minnesota, is in the woods. I mean, let's face it. But 3 blocks in from the edge of town, there were 4 wolves spotted in someone's yard there because we have deer going through our community. So when the domestication of wolves, and that's kind of what I think habituated is the way Jerry says it, but I think to me a lot of it just seems like they are not afraid of people, and when you have them showing up in the alley 3 blocks from the edge of town in a residential area, and you have kids around, etc. Granted, it was at night. Most of the kids were in bed, but people have pictures of them in their yards, and I'm sure that there's many people that'd be willing to send them to you. So it is about the management of the wolves. This is not about trying to make anything. I heard the word hate here. I don't think it's about hating wolves. I certainly don't hate wolves, but I don't want them in my yards. I don't want my grandchildren in my yard and having the wolves right within a block of my home there. So I guess that's all I would say.
Thank you, Commissioner Forsman. Thank you, Mr. Tyler. Next up, we have John Gilbertson, and then in the batter's deck is Tom Peterson and Chris Raddick. So, Radats. I'm just today. Forgive me, guys. Mr. Gilbertson, welcome to the committee. For the purpose of the tape, please introduce yourself and let us know where you hail from.
I am John Gilbertson. I hail from about 20 miles northwest of Bemidji. I am a farmer. I've been a farmer, lived on a farm all my life, and I want to thank you for having the opportunity to come here and tell my story today.
Welcome.
I lived on the farm I live on now for 44 years. I grew up about a mile from my place where I live now. I grew up as a child. back in the days when I was young, you know, every once in a while somebody would be out in the woods cutting wood or something and say, we seen a wolf track go through the area. There's been a wolf in the area. That's quite a few years ago. As the years go on and back through the 50s and 60s and into the 70s, we started having some problems. I have continually had problems of wolf kills on my farm for several years. When it first kind of started, it seemed like it would, you know, we'd have a kill, maybe we'd be lucky to go a couple years without, and then we'd have another one. But the last few years, it's every year. And we had dairy cattle for several years, milk cows, and I actually have had timber wolves come down in the morning to bring up some heifers, excuse me, and I've had timber wolves come right out of the shed where a heifer had just calved. They're after the calves. They're after these young animals that are just born. We've even seen where a cow has laid down to start calving. The calf is starting to be born, and the wolves will be there eating on the calf before it's completely born. Our kids have raised sheep. A few years ago, they came right up in our yard. We don't pasture our sheep out in the woods or nothing. They're right up by the buildings. Wolf come in there one night and killed 3 of our prime sheep. They always say they take the old and the weak. Well, we didn't really have any old and weak. These were all prime show lambs. And when a wolf kills these lambs, it's pretty devastating to these kids because the wolf ain't a kind killer. We hear people talk about how cruel it is for a wolf to put his foot in a trap. Well, when a wolf decides that he's going to kill something, he's not very kind with him either. With the sheep and the DNR were out there and actually skun them out and that, they had never a mark on their throat or anything. They had literally just knocked them down. They tear the ribs out of them, and they eat the livers and the hearts, and they'll go on to the next one until they get full. In that situation, we found this mess in the morning. We locked the sheep up that night in a building, and the wolf came back, and then he did start eating on the carcasses that he had killed the night before. We've had him take calves right out of our yard. The latest, last year, we had a mule, a small mule up in the pasture where a pack had run him up into a brush pile and killed him. And our grandkids came along in the evening after school. We're driving along the edge of the field and found him. He'd been killed the night before. Just a nice mule that they had out there, but they'd run him up into a brush pile and killed him. And by the next day, the next night, the wolf was pretty much cleaned up. Or not the wolf, the mule, excuse me. We've just seen more and more as time goes on. We've had the DNR in and trap many times over the years. A few years ago, they took 9 out 1 year. Like I say, it started kind of that, it wasn't every year, but in the last years, it's more frequently. In the last few years, it's been every year. I've heard people say, in fact, somebody here said to me today, well, why don't you run alpacas with them? I've got a neighbor that run, not alpacas, llamas. I had a neighbor that run llamas with his sheep, and they had young ones with them, and the timber wolf ate the young llamas. So they're not fussy what they eat, and I truly believe that the problem comes from too many wolves. I'm not against the wolf. The wolf is a beautiful animal when he's where he belongs, but he's not that beautiful when he's in my cow yard. I see a lot of T-shirts around here today that says "Howling Wolves" on it. If I'm laying in my bed in a motel down here in the cities and hear a wolf howl, that's a beautiful sound. But when I'm laying in my bed at home and my wife and I hear a wolf howl, it means we better hit the floor running because he's probably after one of our livestock in the yard. We're not against hunting. We're for the hunt. We think that it needs to continue. We need to reduce. We truly believe the numbers are much greater than they are. And if we can reduce the numbers somewhat, they'll eat what they normally would eat naturally and not eat our livestock as much as they have been in the last few years. The kids, it's pretty devastating when these kids that work all year with their 4-H animals and stuff, and they come out to find that a wolf come up in your yard and killed them. So I appreciate you having let me speak today, and I hope that they will continue to let the wolf hunt go on as scheduled. I believe it's the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbertson. Mr. Peterson, Mr. Raddatz, if you can do it in 2 minutes, it would be helpful.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tom Peterson. I represent the Minnesota Farmers Union, and I also live in Pine County on a farm in the wolf area. And our policy does support a wolf hunting and trapping season. Our policy is set by our members. They pass resolutions. I think every county north of the metro area, including Isani and Kanabec County, I see senators on this committee, passed resolutions this year supporting a wolf hunting season. The dollars raised by the wolf hunt, we believe, are important in supporting our state's professional management efforts, which include professional trappers. A couple other quick bullet points I want to make. Not every farmer can hunt and track a wolf and is skilled at it, and so those professional trappers do come in very handy. Not every farmer reports every kill and seeks reimbursement for those kills. A lot of my neighbors, they just don't recognize that a cow has been killed in a timely manner, and so they don't. We heard 80 cows had been killed. It's much higher than that. Not every cow is reported. Wolf kills really impact our smaller producers. I have a farmer who lost had a herd of 27 calves born in the last year, lost 6 of those calves. Our farmers do take preventative measures such as fencing, having donkeys or llamas, etc., and they do try to manage wolves themselves, but are obviously not as successful as they used to be. In closing, I just urge that we do feel the DNR has determined that the population is strong enough to support a hunt, and we urge you to oppose this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Raddatz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm Chris Raddatz, Director of Public Policy for Minnesota. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you. I will be very brief. I would echo Mr. Peterson's comments, and I'll mention also that Mr. Gilbertson serves on our State Board of Directors, and there's many more stories like that out there with farmers who continue to have problems with the wolf. We do support the DNR being able to manage the wolf population in Minnesota. We feel that should include the depredation type programs, the trapping, but should also include hunting and trapping season. We feel they put together a reasonable, responsible hunting season last year, and we hope that can continue, and we do oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's it for the testimony. Both sides were good within a couple of minutes of the 20 minutes we asked for. Questions from the committee, discussion. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Senator Marty. I'm wondering if there's anyone here from the DNR that can give us their position on this issue.
Mr. Meyer, I saw. Is there somebody else from DNR? Oh yes, I'm sorry. Yes. While he's coming up, I'll point out that there are a number of materials in your packets from Wolf Center and a whole bunch of places. I hope members will take a look at that. Welcome to the committee.
Mr. Chair and members, thank you. We'll try to make this brief. I'm Ed Bogus, Director of Fish and Wildlife for the DNR. I've got with me our wolf specialist from Grand Rapids, Dan Stark, and we're rather than go through a lot of information, we're passing out just a kind of a fact sheet for the benefit of the committee that reviews kind of the history of wolf policy in Minnesota, the recovery of the population, the federal delisting you've already heard a lot about. It's been on and off over the last several years. Wolf management since populations recovered, which required not only recovery in Minnesota, but recovery in the western Great Lakes region for the Fish and Wildlife Service to delist. So Minnesota's goals, as was accurately stated, we were the only state that maintained population. Our goals were reached within the state in the late 1980s, but in the whole western Great Lakes region, it wasn't until the late 1990s. And then there's information in this packet about wolf damage management. We have a program. There used to be a federal program. That program now, due to federal budget cuts, it was actually suspended in December of 2011, but the DNR has been contracting with the federal USDA Wildlife Services since April of last year to continue that program on an 8-month out of the year basis rather than the 12 months when it was a federal program. So it's the same program, but with state funding instead of federal funding. There's also state certified trappers and a wolf damage compensation program that's run by the Department of Agriculture. There's information on all of those programs in this packet. And then there's wolf season implementation information in here. And I just wanted to say quickly that DNR is committed to the long-term sustainability of wolf populations in the state and to resolving conflicts between wolves and humans. That's the goal of the state management plan, which was finalized in 2001. We do closely monitor wolves. We used to do a total population estimate on a 10-year basis. We now do it on a 5-year basis, but we do annual trend monitoring through track surveys and indices. And kind of the point of, I think, where we're at in terms of wolf policy in the state. Some of the earlier testifiers talked about wolves being persecuted. That's true. There were government programs to persecute wolves. There were federal programs to eliminate wolves in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The state of Minnesota paid bounties on wolves until the mid-1960s. So policies have changed, times have changed. We're certainly committed to the long-term survival of wolves, but the season that we had this past fall was actually the first managed season on wolves in the state's history. Prior to 1974, when they were fully protected under the Federal Endangered Species Act, wolves were fully unprotected under Minnesota law. So the DNR had never had an opportunity to manage a season on wolves until last year. It was the most closely and intensively managed season that we've ever had on any species. We had literally daily monitoring of harvest, and we were closing areas based on daily harvest totals. We've never done that for any other species. We use a science-based approach. We obviously are going to take whatever direction we get from the legislature and manage wolves consistent with our management plan. And with that, we do have Mr. Stark here. If there are technical questions about wolves or wolf biology or some of the wolf policy, that's his area of expertise. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions from the committee for the DNR?
I have a question.
Sir Scalzi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm just kind of wondering because I look at, first of all, if you have an anticipated new season on any species, I don't care if it's wolf or any kind of species that has not had a hunting season before, what is your typical method of establishing that?
Mr. Chair and Senator Scalzi, typically we would look at the population. I don't know if you're asking about population or process here, but typically we look at the population of that species and what could safely be harvested and what sort of a management structure for a season we would need to keep that harvest within the safe harvest level. So for small game species, we have typically long seasons with high limits and no need to close seasons. For other species that have more limited populations and that are more vulnerable to overharvest, we'll have a drawing for licenses. We may have a quota on the number of licenses. The wolf is, like I said earlier, the only species that we've actually set a quota on the take and then close the season once we reach that quota. So it varies by species and how vulnerable they are.
Senator Scalzi.
Actually, I was talking about the process. What I asked was, how do you go about doing that? How do you go about a typical process where you think maybe there needs to be a season and license and all that for a new species? How would you typically do that?
Mr. Chair and Senator Scalzi, we would go through a public comment process and we would do a rulemaking to establish that season. That's typically how we do it. In the case of the wolf, you know, we had pretty clear direction after last legislative session that was the direction that the legislature expected us to go, was with a wolf season, starting with the firearms deer season.
Mr.
Scalzi.
So then you didn't do a rulemaking when you wanted to decide to have a wolf hunt?
Mr. Chair, Senator Scalzi, we did do a rulemaking.
You did. and I just have one more question, because I look at the map and I see this wolf population is where I grew up. I grew up in Badet. We always had wolves. And I grew up on a farm. We always had sheep and chickens. We didn't have kills. We did, though, have in the area that I came from a lot of wild dogs in packs. And typically what we were led to believe is that a wolf will hunt for food, but the wild dogs will hunt for sport. They do. A pack of dogs is a pretty scary thing. When you did your trapping, and you were trapping for wolves, did you ever, or have you ever caught dogs that were wild dogs in those traps?
Mr. Chair and Senator Scalzi, I'm going to defer to Mr. Stark to respond to that question.
Mr. Stark, welcome to the committee, and please identify yourself before I respond.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Dan Stark. I'm the large carnivore specialist for the DNR. Mr. Chair and Senator Scalzi, there have been dogs caught in traps while trapping for wolves. I think in recent years it's fairly rare when we're either doing research trapping or the depredation control trapping that's done. I don't think that there's feral dogs as common as there may have been, historically, as you mentioned, as today. So that'd be a pretty rare occurrence.
Thank you.
Mr. Bogus, one follow-up to Senator Scalzi's comment. I see somebody had in the letter, maybe from DNR, the letter from former Commissioner Holston to Secretary of the Interior in 2010, which he talks about population management, including public taking, will be considered in the future, but not sooner than 5 years after federal delisting. But the line I wanted to comment on is if in the future public taking is proposed by DNR, there will be opportunity for public comment. I heard from some of the proponents of the legislation, they felt the DNR did not give public comment period at that time. Could you tell me what was the process after the legislature authorized the ability to do it?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Of course, there was a lot of hearings leading up to our getting the authority. After we got the authority, we did an online input process for taking public comments. As I said earlier, we felt we had clear direction on whether or not to have a season, and so our input was primarily about how the season should be structured, what types of seasons we should have. We had a limited amount of discretion in that because the law said the season had to open with the start of the firearms deer season. We had initially proposed a later season that was not incidental to deer hunting, that was more specific to wolves. So we did propose to have an early and a late season, early season as required by law, late season as we had initially proposed. So we took comments through an online process.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Heaton, I'm sorry, I was looking along here and it didn't.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify that there hasn't been any public hearings on hunting since 1995. There was the one online, and that was mainly directed toward hunting.
Thank you. Senator Dibble, then Senator Benson.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Bogus or Mr. Stark, I'm curious about poaching. Arguments have been made that allowing the wolf hunt relieves some pressure on illegal killing of wolves. On the other hand, the counter argument is that when we passed the season, we significantly lowered the penalties for poaching. Do we have any sense on either side of that argument yet? Do we have any data? Do we have an understanding of how bad poaching was? Has it gotten better or worse?
Mr. Chair and Senator Dibble, it's not been that long to have much evaluation. I know in talking to our enforcement division who monitors for illegal taking, they are investigating a number of reports of illegal taking. I don't recall the exact number, less than a dozen. Obviously, we can't catch all of those. I know it's been postulated that allowing a season would improve tolerance and reduce illegal taking, but I'm not aware that we have any data on that.
Thanks.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Senator.
I noticed in this document that you handed out as you started testifying that you're planning to do a comprehensive survey and a population count, et cetera. Does that include evaluating some of these dynamics?
Mr. Chair and Senator Dibble, Mr. Stark may have more to add on this, but that's a survey that's been done by a standardized method for about 30 years now. We do, as I mentioned earlier, we initially did it on a 10-year interval. Now we do it on a 5-year interval to kind of corroborate trend data that we're monitoring on an annual basis. But it's just it's simply the range of the wolf, documenting the range of the wolf, pack sizes, pack numbers, and then calculating an overall population number. It doesn't get at illegal taking.
So,
Senator Dibble.
So thanks. So is there a plan to figure out which side of this argument is I mean, what's actually happening around poaching? If is lowering the penalties, has that had a negative effect on poaching, or allowing the wolf hunt has had a positive effect on poaching? Are we going to try to figure that out? Some form
Mr.
or fashion?
Chair and Senator Dibble, I think Mr. Stark could comment more. Probably the best data that we will get on that question is through telemetry studies, and there are a number of them that have been ongoing and still are going. So I'd ask Mr. Stark to talk about what we can learn from those telemetry studies.
Mr. Stark?
Mr. Chair and Senator Dibble, I think it's pretty difficult to get an actual number for illegal mortality. They'd have to do a comprehensive population dynamics study. I don't know what sample size you would need in order to estimate what the actual number is. It would require a very intensive radio collared study of the population. But regardless, during the time that wolves were listed as an endangered species, the level of illegal take was not enough to not allow the population to recover, and it's exceeded those population objectives and criteria for decades. Our population continues to do well and remains stable, even though those activities are going on. And there's certain things on wolf population dynamics that we don't fully understand. We don't have solid data on, and over time those things are studied, and there's been some publications that have been done in Minnesota, but it's not an ongoing thing that is done. It's a more intensive type of study that would be required.
Senator Benson, and then Senator Brown, and there are lots more. I hope we can wrap it up fairly soon. I want people to get the chance to ask their questions and whatever. Senator Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Eaton, some of your testifiers indicated that this provision was done in the dark of night, behind closed doors, no public information, no public input was allowed. In fact, the budget bill that was passed through special session had been passed previously, and I looked up some information. Senate File 943, Section 53, looks like was passed in May, was vetoed by the governor, had this provision in it. But there was also a floor vote that failed on a bipartisan basis. So when people have been led to believe that this was not publicly vetted, it went through the entire legislative process. It only got signed during the special session. And so I think we need to be clear that there were lots of hearings and lots of opportunity for input. It just happened to hit statute out of a special session, but it wasn't that it wasn't publicly heard. And so that, and the fact that the animals, the wolves had been delisted in 2007, gave us 5 years for the DNR to look at this, and so was in keeping with the spirit of the statute that was in place and then was removed. And so I will not be supporting you on this bill.
Senator Brown and Senator Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Stark, if this moratorium doesn't pass, how will the DNR manage the hunt so that the wolf doesn't end up on the endangered species list?
Mr. Stark.
Mr. Chair and Senator Brown, we'll continue to monitor the wolf population as we have in the past, and as we're laying out now, with comprehensive surveys every 5 years and annual monitoring that's done every year looking at indices of the wolf population. We have a winter track survey, we have a carnivore scent post survey that's done, we have depredation indices, we have some of the ongoing research that's done by Dr. Meach up in Ely. All these things are corroborating evidence towards what the population is doing and supports that our population has remained stable over the period of time between those more comprehensive surveys. And each year make adjustments based on new information, whether that's through regulation or limiting the number of hunters or the number of licenses available or the number of wolves that can be taken.
So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Stark, it sounds to me with everything that you've said, you put a great deal of science behind managing the wolf population. Is that accurate to say?
Mr. Chair and Senator Brown, that's primarily what my role is as a biologist, is to evaluate the population information that we have and make recommendations on what we think the population can support in regards to whatever management aspect it might be.
Thank you.
Senator Osmick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the testifiers. On page 3 of our handout that you provided has a dot matrix of the harvest last year, which actually is quite illuminating because I would have expected the dots to be far more congested in certain areas. Can you speak to your management program for the last wolf hunt in that I think you indicated that there were zones. How many different zones did you have, and how did you alert hunters that had permits? I assume the permits were zone specific, and how did you alert them that the zone was full and they were no longer able to continue in managing the harvest?
Mr. Chair and Senator Osmick, there were 3 zones that were established for the wolf season to distribute some of the harvest or the take of wolves in different parts of the state. Each of those areas there was a harvest target set for each of those zones, and that information was available on a website and also on a 1-800 number where hunters and trappers could call and check the status of the season. Unlike other seasons that we have for other species, we don't have information on what hunting and trapping success rates are for wolves, and so we set a number when we would close the season or initiate the closure of the season. And so it was important that people had to check those numbers and know what's going on during the season. And that's basically how it was
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One final question. The numbers we've been thrown out here today on the current size of the population is something in the 3,000, 2,500, maybe 3,500 range. Do you have a current estimate this year after breeding and after the pups mature, how many new wolves are going to be added to the population prior to the next hunt or prior to the next management season?
Mr. Chair and Senator Osmick, we don't have a specific estimate of those numbers. There's no direct measure of what the pup production is each year, what all the different causes of mortality are. But we can make some general assumptions about, based on the wolf population size, the average number of packs or that we estimate are out there, and the average litter size that has been observed. And it's a cycle each year. In the spring, when pups are born, the population can nearly double. We have, maybe an estimated 500 packs based on our last population estimate. And if each of those packs has 5 to 6 pups, we generally see, a significant increase. But wolves die throughout the year. Pup survival is low, and so, potentially there's already thousands of wolves that die each year. It's just trying to manage that number and identify what would be sustainable, including, a hunting and trapping level.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Eaton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to add that I grew up hunting. I have nothing against hunting. My concern is for the survival of the wolf. I believe that when you put these kind of resources into protecting a species, that it doesn't make any sense to automatically start a recreational hunt once they are delisted. I do believe that I feel at a disadvantage as far as data and information, since the DNR states the hunter as their main client, and that their whole purpose is to make sure that there's a good take, which is their word for kill.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chair, just a question to you. What's the next destination for this bill?
This bill would go to I believe, the Senate Finance Committee. There is a fiscal note because of loss of licenses, I think.
Mr. Chair, wouldn't that actually go through Senator Tomassoni's group? Because they are the...
He's the finance.
Oh, I'm sorry. I heard finance, but not the Tomassoni finance. Thank you. Division.
Senator Benson.
No, Mr. Chair, I was going to make a motion that we move the bill.
Okay. On the motion that Senate file...
And I'll ask for a roll call vote, Mr. Chair.
666 be recommended to pass and referred to the Committee on Finance. A roll call has been requested. Any further discussion from the committee? On that motion, take the roll, please.
Senator Marty?
Aye.
Senator Benson?
No.
Senator Brown?
No.
Senator Dibble?
Yes.
Senator Eaton?
Yes.
Senator Herr?
Yes.
Senator Hoffman?
Yes.
Senator Coonan?
No.
Senator Osmick?
No.
Senator Rosen?
No.
Senator Scalzi?
Yes.
Senator Schmidt? Senator Sieben? Yes. Senator Weber?
No.
By a 7-6 vote, the motion does pass and goes on its way to the Finance Committee.